Horizon Lunar Colony can be troublesome to attack if you don't know the very important playstyles I'm going to break down in today's video. What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for Your Overwatch, and today we're going to be breaking down Horizon Lunar Colony, Point B and Point A, starting naturally with Point A. There's basically two options to successfully defend. Either you attempt to make an outside hold with ranged characters, and this, I think, is the most obvious one that players fall victim to, because, of course, if you don't properly shield yourself from the ranged damage from the Torb, Soldier, Hanzo, or whatever, that's sitting on the high ground crossfiring into the wide open area, well, you're going to get wrecked by it. Running a standard dive comp can seem fairly difficult to safely traverse from point A to point B to get to where you want to be to engage the enemy. Now, you can do it, of course, if your diva is really good at protecting your team to make sure that nobody gets left behind, to have stray damage hit them as you're trying to traverse these open areas to get somewhere useful. But if that doesn't happen, or if your team just isn't coordinated to utilize the defense matrix in order to do so, I highly suggest that you take Reinhardt on this point. It allows for you to reach the win condition of getting your team to be able to engage where it's favorable for you and unfavorable for this outside hold defense. If you see them posting up either on top of the control room or on the balcony, the Rein shield can very clearly indicate safety for your team and ferry them along to get into close quarters on the point. And then, of course, once you do get onto point, especially if you are running characters that are strong in close quarters, the enemy defense, which has either been set up with a Torb or a Soldier to fight from range from you, is going to be at a disadvantage and put on the hot seat at the same time because they have to contest the point. They're going to have to fight you on your terms. Footage being shown here is some pretty bad Reinhardt, okay? But we take this point anyway because the Rein shield is just so good to make sure that my team doesn't get poked down from range from all the different strong range damage that exists in the game right now. When you're defending in this way, you can think of this as sort of a greedy position. Whenever you're outside trying to fight them out in the open, whether your tanks are on the high ground with you or engaging down on the low ground, which I think is the better strategy, the enemy always have the ability to just run past all that and get to the point and force the defense to retake into the offense and actually flipping the roles completely. Because if you're holding the ground, the objective, and they're retaking into you, it's as if you had defender's advantage in that instance. And that's what you kind of want to create when going against an outside hold. But since that is relatively easy to counter once you know that, you can utilize Diva and or Rein to be able to block range damage to get yourself in close range. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, we're on the point, we're fighting. What happens if the enemy's set up on the point? Which is the standard way to hold, I'd say. With close range characters themselves or an Orisa Torb, things like that. A real death ball-y style of comp that's hard to fight into. Well, yet again, dive isn't the answer here. Of course, you might be able to dive into this comp with some success if you quickly find value and purchase, but if they have any good peel or good healing to sustain themselves, and you don't get a kill very quickly with your dive comp, I think you're going to struggle, and that strategy is probably going to be fairly weak against especially an Orisa Torb or a Reaper or other characters that might play defensively on this point. If with your flanky, divey type characters, you can find an enemy who's particularly weak to get dove, whether it's the McCree or Hanzo, characters like that are very easy to pick out, and you get that character first, you might be able to snowball from there. But otherwise, the number one tip I have, you can make use of the long range sight lines that you have to get into the point. Widowmaker and Hanzo are amazing at firing into the objective and applying pressure from range. If the enemy have to divert any resources to play out in the open, it's going to make that on-point fight even easier. If they have to dedicate a tank or a flanker to go chase down your Widowmaker, it's going to give you an advantage on the point. Or, of course, you can develop what I like to call a bend until it breaks playstyle against this really turtley style defense. As you notice that the enemy is all in on holding the objective, don't overly commit into the fight. Instead, poke and prod to try to find an opening, find a weakness, find a character peeking out from the shield, or play to win the shield battle. Have enough patience to allow your ranged characters to do their work to eventually either get a pick or get some critical damage that you can follow up on. Patience is the key against this, because far too often do you see teams over-engage and just try to fight onto the Orisa and Torb, and then they get shredded, or a Mercy comes back and reses. A much more methodical, sustained push is going to do you a lot better. Okay, so you got in the hang of how to attack the first point. Create an engagement that makes the opponent fight in a way they're not built to. If they're overly turtly, they're not going to have the dive potential to get on various range threats. And if they're long range on the high ground, well, you can just kind of bypass all that nonsense and force them to retake into you. Now, speaking of that strategy, point B is a little bit more tricky, and we're going to discuss multiple ways of attack. One interesting one is if the enemy get too trigger happy and fight on your side of the turf, well, we can just go get a tick for free. Because if we speed away from the enemy here, we're going to pull them onto the point. They got to panic, right? Now, ideally, the thing that's going to close out this point 9 times out of 10 is having a ranged character on the balcony. If you feel like you're struggling to take this point, a huge percentage of your success is going to be based upon who's winning the balcony battle. Do you have a good ranged DPS player up there who's able to clean up kills in order to close out a fight? Of course, it's 2 CP. In order to cap 3 ticks on the point, you're going to have to kill the enemy, I don't know, 18 times or something. Playing 2 CP oftentimes feels like horde mode, where you have to make sure that you're set up to not take any casualties because the enemy zombies are infinite and your friendlies are few. And even going down 1 can be the end of a push. So it's important to make sure that as a DPS player, you don't get too gung-ho on jumping on point. I know this might be breaking some sincerely held beliefs about playing the objective, but squishy characters should avoid the objective when possible, and you leave tanks on there because they have really strong point presence. They have the HP pools to toss around when damage is coming in, because of course, when the retake is coming, transitioning as a ranged DPS player from the low ground onto the high ground does a few things. One, it gives you a vantage point to be able to see the best target and make it really difficult for them to avoid your damage. And 2, it makes it expensive for you to get focused. As the enemy are trickling back out, they're looking for squishy targets to focus down. A healer's pretty good, but a DPS I think sometimes is even better because with the enemy DPS eliminated, your friendly trickle can oftentimes come back even more impactful. If you don't have the necessary damage sources to really melt characters, that time to kill can be all the difference between the enemy getting more respawns and you closing the point before they touch it again. Positioning is key, making sure that you don't die on the enemy respawns retake is really important. Even cheese can end up working quite well on Horizon Point B. You'd be surprised. I've seen lots of interesting things work. I've seen teams put Orisa Bastion on the high ground. I keep getting Torbs on attack somehow and still winning with it. I think it's because the enemy can't really afford to go too deep into your side, both onto the balcony once you've secured it, or really even onto this ramp where we have this turret set up. So for that matter, 2 things I think work really well on Point B. Ranged characters of all stripes. Soldier Bastion, Torb even, I've seen work enough to say that I have faith in it. Orisa even, especially with her bongo, being able to put it at a safe distance that isn't diveable, can really close out this objective. Some combination of that as well as some strong point presence, characters that are really strong at brawling on the point. So of course tanks, take your pick. Whichever is strong against your opponent's picks is probably good, even going into the next meta, which has a lot more question marks at the moment. But one of the best characters to put on the point is Reaper, because if the team fight forms properly, just like how our turret was hard to be dove, just how our soldier's hard to be dove from far away, your healers are probably going to be a little bit off the point as well, meaning that they can easily put resources onto the Reaper. So I think you're going to find having a well-disciplined spread of having your resources on your team positioned in order to keep the proper units alive, as well as putting their supportive resources onto your point presence characters. When you're able to touch the point, that's how you're going to be able to stave off the incoming respawns. I think this structure and design of Point B is spectacular, by the way. Having the option to have severely advantageous high ground overlooking not only the point, but the exit doors of the enemy's respawns is the reason why I think Horizon is favored for the offense. It's the only 2 CP map, to my knowledge, to have a positive win rate on the offensive side. I think this should be the template for every 2 CP map. In fact, I go as far as to say the other remaining 2 CP maps should be edited in order to fit this design philosophy of having an incredibly strong, advantageous position that the offense can take. The other maps have somewhat strong positions that they can take, but nowhere near as strong as the Horizon one. I think those other maps could be re-edited to be far more playable as the Horizon map, which I think right now stands as the best 2 CP map. Okay, other shenanigans that you might come across is players sending a pharmacy to the top This can create some fairly interesting engagements, considering both dive tanks and Mercy will be jumping up there to either protect or to harass the characters in question. I would say the two main things that you'll need to have in order to attack into this is a really good peeling diva, perhaps even a Doomfist, to help spread out and protect hit scan threats as you control the positioning on either side. Both attack and defense could use the rafters to send a pharmacy up there, but it's probably more advantageous for the defense. But with that being the case, note that that decreases the value of the high ground to the right because the cover that far has from the rafters is fairly strong, meaning that you're not going to be able to dedicate your entire focus up there. You probably want to split hit scans on either side, but of course you got to keep them alive. And you're really going to want to play to secure a ranged kill and not overcommit elsewhere until you get it, because those peeling characters that I mentioned already are good on point as well, but it's difficult for them to both keep point presence and maintain defending your hit scans, which more or less have to win a duel there, or else you're unlikely to get a lot of progress. Conversely, of course, there is the strategy to just put a big tanky lineup onto the point because Pharmacy is going to struggle to come down to your level. That can work as well. 2 or 3 tanks and a high burst damage ground character like Reaper might be able to secure a tick before they even can contest on you. You might want to use an attacking Sombra as well, though, to be able to disable the enemy team's tanking so that your Reaper can find its damage. If you come across a Orisa Torb, much like point 1, the answer is going to be the same. More range damage, especially Hanzo, is really good to be able to do his job while outside of the turret's range, whereas flanky characters on this point, I have to mention, struggle quite a bit against a number of things that defenses typically like to run. The map is a wide open sightline, which means there's not really anywhere to hide, and any movement you're going to make, sure, you might get in on a fight quickly, but it's difficult to retreat to any type of safety. And because of this, McCree on both attack and defense can be quite good, and High Noon never looked better. Because it is so difficult to either death ball behind safety of a Rhine Shield or defense matrix, as you likely will have to split up on this point. In a lot of dangerous mid-fight situations, popping the High Noon can just close out the entire fight for either side. Another strategy that I see a lot of teams struggle with is the overcommitted high ground holds, where the enemy team puts an entire death ball on top of the high ground. This can feel terrible to try to walk into over and over again and push your way through to try to get that ground that you want so badly. You can attempt to fight on the point, but that just gives them the high ground advantage. You're probably going to have to set up some sort of zoning ult, combined with a crowd control ult if you can help it, a cheeky Hanzo ult, a Diva Bomb to displace them, High Noon from an alternate angle. All these types of things can be really effective at disrupting a death ball on that high ground. That strategy as well I would label as a big risk because it can stump enemy offenses quite severely, but once you know how to utilize these counters that I just mentioned, it could force the enemy defense in a tailspin, because if you get a quick kill or a quick dispersion, which just displaces the enemy team in a way they weren't set up to deal with, in an instant, you can have all the ground you want and be crossfiring into them and be controlling the map and take the point basically after that. Okay, so we've discussed quite a few different strategies here today. Having so many present shows the flexibility of this map, but also where the state of the game is of Overwatch, that so many different things can feel very viable on Horizon Lunar Colony. I'm sure if you've been watching the Overwatch World Cup, you've already known this, as many teams have approached this map in various different ways, and although the map might seem frustrating at first, once you understand the different strategies you can employ, and there's even more that I haven't even had time to mention, then I think you can have a newfound interest in, if not all 2CP maps, at least this one. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a rating. It does help us out, lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please subscribe, because we upload each and every day, so you're going to want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description, you can check out our Twitter and Discord server where you can interact with our community and find teammates to pair up with. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.